Good morning, Mr. Chair and members.
Good morning,
of
Madam Clerk.
Kingston. Hope everyone is well this morning on this bright, beautiful morning. It is 9:30, and Mr. Chair, if it's all right with you, I'll just do our brief introduction here. So welcome, everyone. I do want to start out, Mr. Chair, with letting you know that we do currently have quorum. Those who are missing at this time are Councillor Doherty, Moya Doom, oh, there's Councillor Doherty now, excellent. Moya Doomville, Janine O'Reilly, Paul Banfield, and Jennifer Demetor.
Yep.
All right then, and so I also want to extend a welcome to Ted Smith, who's joining us for the first time this morning as one of our new members. And I hope that Janine O'Reilly will be able to join us shortly as well. We might pass the mic over to them after this introduction to introduce themselves. Mr. Chair, at this time, joining us are from staff are Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Andrea Gummo, Manager of Heritage Planning, Ryan Leary, Senior Planner, Heritage Services, Alex Rose Thompson, Planner for Heritage Services, Janet James, Deputy City Clerk. I have Ian Sullivan, who is our meeting host for this morning, and I myself am Elizabeth Fawcett. I am the committee clerk for Heritage Kingston. At this time as well, Mr. Chair, we do have approximately 7 or 8 agents and applicants on the call, and we have 2 members of the public at this time. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So I'll call the meeting to order at 9:32 with all the business being done. Can I get pictures on the screen so that I can see how people are voting?
Mr. Chair, if you're unable to see everyone, up in the top right corner of your Zoom screen is the view button. If you change that to gallery view, you should be able to.
Oh, now we can see everybody. Thank you very much. Okay. Calling the meeting to order then, you have an agenda. You have 2 items added to that, at least 1 item, 2 letters added to that agenda under part 12, which you received yesterday. Looking for a mover to approve the amended agenda. Councillor Doherty is seconder. Donald Mitchell, thank you very much. Any discussion on the amended agenda? And seeing none, those in favour? And those opposed? You have an agenda. We have minutes for May the 17th. There are 2 minor amendments which have been made on page 12. Ray Zabak, this is about in the middle, beginning of a paragraph, Ray Zabak, architect and agent for the proponent. And at the top of page 13, Mr. Scheinman, consultant rather than architect for the proponent. So with those 2 minor corrections, is there a mover to the approval of those minutes? Don Taylor, thank you, and a seconder. Don't all jump at once. Jane McFarlane, thank you very much. Discussion on those updated minutes, I won't say amended, updated minutes. And seeing none, those in favour and those opposed, and you have a set of minutes for May the 17th. Pecuniary interest, and as ever, if you suddenly realise that you are in such a situation, please say so immediately. I see no hands at present. Presentations, delegations, briefings. We always get down to item 8 so quickly, don't we? Business. Policy development and implementation. Ms. Gummo, I believe you're going to update us on the City of Kingston parking discussion paper. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, HK members, and welcome to our new member. So what I'm going to do this morning is a very quick verbal update on this work that's being led by Planning Services. And I'm very happy to coordinate any seeking of information or questions that you'd like to ask if I'm not able to answer them. The main reason that I'm drawing this to the committee's attention is because there's kind of a novel approach introduced in this discussion paper as a possibility for council to later consider as part of the new zoning bylaw, and that is having no parking minimums for heritage designated properties. This is a little bit exciting for us in Heritage Services because it offers an incentive to property owners to be designated. So we think it's a great opportunity, and we just wanted to kind of bring that to the committee's attention. The discussion paper, I think, is quite clear, but I am happy to help if there are any questions, or to put you in touch with Laura Flaherty, who's the project manager for that work as part of the new zoning bylaw update. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And you'll remember that last month we had quite a discussion around exactly that item on the Albert Street property, which was difficult because of the current parking situation. So questions to Ms. Gumbel? Comments? Thoughts? Can't get, oh, Donald, good.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new member. Through you, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't mind if we had small discussion about this offline of this meeting. I have a few concerns, and they're a little wider than heritage. And I know that this is, I'm going to the accessibility stakeholder meeting later today, and I know that this is going to have a number of stakeholder meetings, and then it goes to public on the 23rd. My concern about heritage is aging in place based, and it's also based, so it's based on accessibility, aging in place, and also a number of other constraints that have come up over the years with heritage properties. And while I recognize every expert and world authority and book I've read says we're heading this direction, I want to ensure that whatever the minimum is, or zero parking requirements, et cetera, that we impose, that we're meaningfully thinking about the laneways, the number of parking spaces that are now parallel to laneways in front of garage doors, et cetera, and other constraints in the Heritage District. And I acknowledge that there is a wealth of expertise on this committee that goes far beyond my own understanding, and we all work together towards this. But I do think a small group of people should get together and meet with staff and be certain there aren't unforeseen consequences that might come out of really drastically changing the way we deal with parking. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Don. And I know Andrew will have heard that. Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our new members, Ted as well. I think it was Ted, sorry. Good to have you. And I appreciate it being here too. I've missed most of the discussion. I'm a councillor. I do not know this file deeply yet, and I know I will. We got a lot on our hands right now with council. So, but I wanted to ask Andrea about, I thought Donald had a good expression there, unforeseen consequences. And I think I've already received some reassurances, but that's what a discussion paper is, right? It gives us that opportunity to have a fulsome look from all angles, and certainly with heritage as well. And certainly as a rural councillor, you know, there's a lens that I always apply to it as well when, you know, we all have to drive in and, you know, we have to, you know, so, but so it's a little bit outside of heritage, though I think Donald's concerns are very valid, and a subcommittee might be helpful for us as heritage. So, but that is what we have a chance to do, is to look at it from a lens that maybe, you know, what could be, what if we go too hard in certain areas, what would be a negative consequence, and we want to avoid, and what are we learning from other municipalities and cities like Kingston. So I'm looking forward to more discussion on it. I don't have a lot, but I would like to, you know, make sure we have a really good look at it and make sure it doesn't drive people away as well, or limit our economic development and all those things. So that's my thoughts for now.
Good, thank you. Other thoughts or comments, knowing that we will be coming back to this formally or informally? Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask Ted Smith if you could add your video, because otherwise I can't see your voting. Yes, Elizabeth.
Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to let you know that I do believe Ted's having a little bit of problem with his internet. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that he can still hear us. We will have to check in with him
Yep.
verbally if there's a vote. The other thing is, Mr. Chair, that Ms. O'Reilly is actually on the meeting with us. She is joining us by phone. So if it's all right with you, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to ask if she could raise her hand just so that I know which phone number she is, so that we can go to her when we need to.
Yep.
Janine, if you could raise your hand using *9 on your phone, that would allow me to verify who you are in the meeting at this time. Excellent. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I do see that Janine is with us in the meeting. So just when we do have a vote, we will need to request that she audibly.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. 8C, anything on Pump House or McLaughlin? And seeing nothing, then we move on to stat business. Part 4, application at 1403 Highway 15. And who is introducing this one?
I am, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. To Ted, our newest member, and Janine. So I'm beginning with our first application of the morning, which you might see a trend in the next month or so. I've got a lot of garages and garage renovations on my plate right now. So here's the first of many to come. So we're looking at a Part 4 designated property on Highway 15, and we have an application for alteration under Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the east side of Highway 15, just north of John Marks Avenue and south of Highway 401. Next slide, please. The property contains a 1.5-story red brick farmhouse, which was constructed in 1865. This farmhouse is located on the east side of Highway 15 and set back approximately 16 meters from the roadway. Historically, this house formed part of a rural agricultural landscape that was far beyond the city limits. For most of its history, the property was much larger in size, comprising this farmhouse and approximately 125 acres of land. This rural landscape has experienced considerable change in the last 40 years or so as residential and commercial development have expanded north and south along Highway 15. The property is now partially surrounded by industrial and commercial uses, and Highway 15 is dominated by relatively fast-moving traffic. Nonetheless, the approximately 1-acre parcel retains mature trees and lilac bushes, which do soften the impact of the surrounding urbanizing environment and maintain some semblance of its former agricultural landscape. Next slide, please. So the property was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1983. And bylaw number 2483 describes the building as follows. The Baxter House is a 1.5-story red brick dwelling with a coarse cut limestone foundation. It is built on a rectangular plan. There's a smaller 1.5-story centered gable wing attached to the north side of the house, and on the east side is an attached single-story woodshed. Certainly there's more detailing and more information in the full bylaw, but that sort of just gives us a brief understanding of the main kind of form of the building. Next slide, please. So staff visited the site, or at least from the roadway in my car with my children on April 27th. And took the best look around that I could. And in assessing these potential impacts of the detached garage on the cultural heritage value and attributes of the property, we've reviewed the proposed location, size, height, and design of the garage. The primary conservation goal being to maintain the prominence of the farmhouse and to ensure that the new garage does not negatively impact its setting. The proposed location is approximately 45 feet south of the farmhouse, identified there in the red circle, and approximately 4 feet back from the front wall of the main house. The applicants have explored other locations for the garage to the rear of the property, but the presence of a large septic bed to the east of the house and many mature trees and perennial gardens did eliminate this option. The construction of the garage in this location will not necessitate the removal of well-established trees, but will involve the removal of some older lilac bushes and the replanting of some younger ones to fill in the existing hedgerow there. Accordingly, the mature soft landscaping, which does help to maintain this rural setting, the rural setting for the house, will be conserved. Please. The garage will be visible from Highway 15, but the proposed distance between the garage and the farmhouse, as well as the retention of the vegetation and mature trees, will provide a visual buffer, which will help to maintain the distinctive identity and presence of the house. In this location, the garage will not directly impact any of the farmhouse's heritage attributes, which does follow guideline 13 in section 4.3.1 of the standards and guidelines, which recommends selecting the location for a new addition that ensures the heritage value of the place is maintained. Additionally, a detached garage in this location will ensure that there's no confusion regarding what is historic and what is new, which again follows guideline 14 in the same section, which recommends designing a new addition in a manner that draws a very clear distinction between what is historic and what is new. Next slide, please. 3 members provided comments regarding the location, and largely those comments were concerns with the proposed location of the garage. Several members suggested that it be sited further back from the front wall of the farmhouse or to the rear of the property. One member proposed that rotating its position so that it fronted the driveway may help to lessen its presence in competition with the house. Next slide, please. Of interest, the owners have accurately pointed out that the proposed garage location will help to screen views of the KOPI facility, which you see to the southeast of the farm, which does form an inappropriate commercial backdrop to the rural character of this property. Next slide, please. So the proposed garage measures 28 feet by 28 feet and is 19 feet tall to the ridge line, which is approximately 6 feet lower than the ridge line on the farmhouse. This lower height of the garage will help to maintain the visual prominence of the farmhouse. The proposed roof form is a gable roof with an 8/12 pitch and will be oriented with the gable end facing Highway 15 or west. The roof pitch of the garage is proposed to match that in the farmhouse, which will provide a harmonizing design element. A traditional overhead garage door is proposed with a person door to the rear of the north elevation. The owners have not yet finalized the garage door or person door designs, and as such, staff have included a condition requiring that finalized design details be submitted for final review. The proposed external cladding is an architectural board and batten vinyl siding in a beige tone, which you can see on the slide in front of you as an example. Staff have encouraged the applicant to consider wood and other wood alternatives, but the applicants are confident that the vinyl board and batten will have a traditional appearance and be longer lasting. In terms of the form and design of this board and batten, as a cladding, it is an appropriate style for an outbuilding on a property with a rural character or context. Staff have expressed their reservations about the materiality of this vinyl siding to the applicant and continue to have some reservations about its use in the context of a heritage property and would prefer to see wood or a wood alternative from a best practice perspective. Some members also added to this conversation, particularly commenting that the vinyl siding is not an appropriate material for the heritage character of the property and that they would prefer to see wood here. However, after careful consideration, staff are of the opinion that given the location of the garage, which is 45 feet south of the farmhouse and approximately 17 meters east of Highway 15, and given the car-dominated context of Highway 15, that it will be extremely difficult from the public realm, particularly for the general public, to discern the materiality of the board and batten siding. Additionally, given the distance and the visual buffer of the trees between the farmhouse and the new garage, staff do not anticipate any negative impacts to the heritage attributes of the farmhouse resulting from the vinyl siding. Additional comments from committee members included a discussion on the asphalt shingles, simply identifying that they should be a plain, solid, dark color, and as opposed to a variegated or architectural shingle, which is when you get a sort of variation in color over the shingle. So staff have included a condition requiring that plain, solid colored shingles be used on the garage. 2 members also provided comments regarding the garage door and person door, noting that they should be simple and very plain in their design. And additionally, if windows are to be incorporated into the garage door design, they should be complementary to the style of the windows on the main farmhouse. And as such, staff have included a condition requiring that heritage planning staff review the finalized garage and person door designs. So in summary, the proposed form and design of the garage is compatible with the farmhouse in terms of its massing and exterior form, which does align with the direction provided in guideline 15 of the exterior form of the standards and guidelines. Arguably, a wood material or other comparable wood alternative would be more compatible in the garage than the proposed vinyl siding. However, as previously explained, in this specific context, with the garage sited 45 feet away from the farmhouse and set well back from a traffic-oriented environment, staff are confident that the vinyl siding will not have a negative impact on the cultural heritage value and attributes of the farmhouse or of the public's appreciation of this built heritage resource. Next slide, please. So So in front of you is a recommendation that Heritage Kingston recommends to council that the garage be approved in accordance with the details described in the application. And on the next slide, you'll find a number of conditions relating to this approval, including that Heritage Planning staff be circulated the building permit drawings, details relating to the color of the siding, the garage door and garage door and person door designs, as well as any proposed lighting scheme. And I welcome questions now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to, before giving it to the committee, to ask you one question, which I thought was mentioned, and I can't remember where, and that is that Highway 15 is planned to be widened and will take away some of the land between the present highway and this house. Is that right?
That is my understanding. Yes, there will be some land taken.
So it's the east side of the highway, which is going to be widened that way. Okay, thank you very much. Committee members. Don Taylor.
Yes, thank you. This is certainly a challenging. Sorry, are you hearing me? I lost my screen. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, just fine. Thanks, Don.
Okay. Yeah, some questions certainly arise. I guess one is that it's very difficult for the committee to judge what's a good location for this garage and what might be a better location without a site visit. I would have thought that in a sort of wide open space like this, we should be able to wander around a bit and look at it, look at the possibilities. So was it not possible to have a site visit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding, and perhaps Andrea or Jennifer Campbell can help me out if I'm incorrect. I don't believe that we have the liberty of arranging site visits at this time. I believe that, I mean, I assume that will be changing in the near future, but at the time this application came in, I wasn't under the impression that I was able to do a site visit because we were in an emergency lockdown, so gathering rules were in force, etc.
Thank you. Another question relates to the setback on the side boundaries, which is shown as 4.5 meters, whereas in a lot of residential properties, in my understanding, it's normally 1.5 meters. And that the amount of setback that's allowed, is it really a game changer in the possibilities of locating this garage? Could be moved much closer to the boundaries and be less visible, so on. So why is it 4.5 meters for this property? And would it be easy to get approval for a 1.5 meter setback allowance?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So the current zoning requires that setback. It is it's a rural zoning for this property, given its location. Certainly, if the property owners wish to propose a smaller setback, they could go through the minor variance process under the Planning Act. There's no guarantee, of course, whether it would be successful or not. Certainly would need to pass the 4 tests as prescribed under the Planning Act, but certainly removing that restriction of the 4.5 meters would provide more flexibility in siting the garage. It would, of course, require another process as well.
Yes, and another question, which to some extent you may have answered, but I guess given the comments from the members, which were pretty negative about the vinyl material and about the location being too visible or, detracting from the farmhouse, I guess the question is, why would staff approve the recommendation when the balance of the committee recommendations is really not in favor?
Sure. Well, respectfully, Mr. Chair, all four members did not comment on the vinyl siding negatively. I believe it was actually 2 members, and certainly about 3 members commented on the location. So, and obviously comments were not received from the remainder of the committee. So on balance, and in assessing my professional opinion of the context in the site and having done a site visit, I felt comfortable and that this application did actually meet the policy objectives and meet the threshold to be supported.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gummo. You're muted.
Apologies. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to add really briefly to Alex's excellent response that while we consider HK's comments in our recommendations really are only our own as staff. We don't adjust our recommendations based on HK comments. We work them in the process, but they don't determine our final recommendations. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Others wishing to speak on this? Donald Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I think my first question is actually to you or the committee clerk. I'm wondering about process, and I'm wondering about opportunities for the committee to hear from the actual applicants or representative and be able to drill down a little bit into the details about location. Is that opportunity provided or is it not?
That will usually happen after the committee have made their comments. So you can ask the question now and we will get to the answer in a little bit.
Okay, so I'll proceed and this would be obviously easier in a site visit and in a dialogue, and at the committee meeting level, it's difficult, but I just wanted to make a number of comments and then it leads to a question. So this area, when you look at it on Google Maps or you drive by, I think you're immediately struck that there's been some tremendous change in this area, and that in my lay person opinion, the context of the area has significantly changed, from new neighborhoods to high fences, across the street from this property now, to major commercial or industrial, whichever they are, uses that have been put right up, close to this property. I would argue there are real adverse impacts by these adjacent properties, and I don't think this is the first time probably any of us have seen where abutting different zonings, abutting or adjacent uses have caused significant adverse impacts, and it comes to a question of whether they're appropriate or not. So I'm very sympathetic to all of that in a wider consideration of this property. And then I start to drill down. For me, I come from a background as an actor, so it's very hard for me not to get passionate, personal, emotional, and also treat things from my own perspective. And so I look at this from the perspective that I own this property, and this is a decision that I'm making. And so I look at things like the trees and how you can use selective planting to mask and hopefully buffer and mitigate some of these very, very immense impacts. And I've experienced that. My neighbor over the back fence put in a 3-story building. I sent my letter of support and everything, and then they cut down every tree on the fence line. And 8 years later, finally the cedars are the height, they're over the house, and my other 3 trees I've planted are sort of 3/4 of the way up the house. It'll be 10 years before I get any kind of green buffer again back. So I'm sympathetic to the loss of trees, but on the other side of that equation, I'm very cognizant that, like in the Heritage District, we protect these trees now, and yet some of them property owners have planted. And in the case of the property that I'm involved in managing, some of those trees were planted in the middle 90s. And now you go through a whole tree inventory and a protection. And so the loss of a tree balanced against the Part 4 property focus sort of attributes that we're trying to preserve. 50 feet is the width of my property. So in an urban context, 50 feet has a different context to me than 50 feet in a rural context. The visual buffer, is a consideration to my mind. And I believe, looking at this application, there are a number of options and a number of choices, and I have concern whether we've had the dialogue and really explored these, and whether the homeowner really understands these from our perspective, and whether we fully understand it from their perspective. The final piece that I'll maybe throw out there in this evaluation, or the question for me, is I'd like to understand much better. I feel I'm honor bound to look at this as a Part 4 designation, and I would do everything in the realm of my perception, my opinion, my take on heritage for this property to protect that. If it was accessibility, it would be accessibility that I would focus on primary. So in this context, I just want to know from the homeowners some of the rationale of why this exact location was chosen, because to me as a committee member, it seems like subjective choices or personal choices are set up for me to try to evaluate from my own small role in all this as a recommendation to council against what I think are significant Part 4 considerations. So that's kind of my questions to the applicants if they're here or available. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Jane McFarlane.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the widening of Highway 15 and the speed limit. I think that was referred to in the application. So could someone clarify what the speed limit is now? And then I'll get to my other question.
It is, Councillor Hustaff, you probably know this better than me. It is 70 just going down to 60 at John Marks Avenue, isn't it? Yeah, so it's right on the 70 to 60 boundary, or 60 to 70 if you're going out of town.
Okay, so my next question is, if the road is widened and there are bicycle paths going by it, et cetera, what the public sees is going to be different down the road. And if we approve vinyl siding, or we say, or if I say, well, I guess that'll be okay because their cars are whizzing by and it's far back from the road. I'm thinking about this Part 4 designated property, and really vinyl siding is inappropriate, and we don't know down the road how this property will be accessed by the public realm. So I'm putting that out there. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions from committee members? And seeing none, then I'll move on to members of the public. And Elizabeth will remind you how to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For members of the public who are joining us this morning, should you wish to speak to this application, you will need to raise your hand in Zoom. To do so, you will find that raise hand function in the center of your Zoom screen when you move your mouse over top of that screen. For those joining us via phone, the raise hand function is *9. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any raised hands. However, I do see that Ms. Tipperman, who is the applicant, is available and she wishes to speak at this time.
Yes, Zoe Timperman.
Are we on? Hello?
If you are Zoe Timperman, yes.
Okay, my wife's name is Zoe Timperman, spelled wrong.
Our name is spelled incorrectly.
Okay, we'll believe that's you. So you had some questions given to you. Could you have some answers?
Yes, can you hear us all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. With respect to the site visit that Don Mitchell mentioned, yeah, you're welcome to visit here and look around and see why we decided to put the garage where it is. And from our point of view, it's the only place we can put it until we are eventually on sewer and water systems, which will be 20 years. And then the septic bed will disappear and it could go on the other side at the back. But other than that, taking out a whole bunch of trees in the back is counterproductive.
Okay, thank you very much. Were there other questions that have been asked you? I don't think so. Or do you want to make any other comments?
The other question was reference the vinyl siding.
Yes.
And we are bikers too, and we've biked from here to Treasure Island and further. And we've stopped at lots of houses with vinyl siding for their garages or even for their home. And they look really nice. Now, the other factor there is the cost of wood. The cost of wood has skyrocketed, whether it's processed wood or just plain boards. So that's our.
Well, I'd like to make a comment because every year we spend 80 to 100 hours maintaining, repairing, scraping, and painting all of our current wood doors, wood window sills, wood frames. Donna's up on the roof on the gables, and it's a lot of work. Here's a picture of the way our house looked
This
when we moved
this
in.
might put things in perspective because as Mr. Mitchell said, this is our where's the camera? Right there. This is our house, taken from the air in 2006. So it's only 15 years ago. And you can see all those trees behind there. There were 18 of them. And when Kobe went in there, they took out half of them. More than half of them.
There's only 8 left now.
So we planted all the cedars on the east side in order to make some sort of a buffer between us and Lyrico. We planted all the lilac on the north side in order to provide some sort of a buffer there. And the maples were all planted by the reeds. So there's the historical trees. The only one is the big oak tree on our property at the back. That's the only historical tree there.
Okay, thank you very much. Other members of the public wishing to speak? And I am not seeing any.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. I'm not seeing any hands either.
Good, thank you. So we move on to a mover and a seconder for the motion to approve as printed in your agenda. Looking for a mover. Councillor Doherty, looking for a seconder. Councillor Oosterhoff, thank you. So it is up for further discussion. Don Taylor.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think particularly for new members, you'll realize that we sometimes have difficult applications and difficult decisions. And I think there's certainly some concerns that have already been raised, and I'd like to sort of go through them a bit. I guess in a sense, as a member, I have to say that this is, I've been really disappointed in some ways. First of all, this is a wonderful property. It's the Baxters were, I think, the prominent family along this highway at the time. And this is a wonderful building that is left to us, and it really is important. So, given that it's such a fine building, I think it's disappointing that the applicants didn't get advice or plans from a heritage designer, an architect, or a contractor. But you know, not everybody wants to do that. Given that, I think I'm also disappointed that the applicants have ignored the advice of heritage staff and heritage members about the material and about the location. So in these situations, you know, not everybody's going to be happy. And so we have to make some tough decisions. Personally, I'm very disappointed that staff recommended approval, given the sort of problems which they fully recognized and they fully discussed. Obviously, they fully discussed them with the applicants, and which those of us who commented also recognize. And I think it's unfortunate that they have approve the recommendation because it makes it appear that to the applicants that, well, staff have approved it. Surely the committee should approve it, and surely council will approve it. But I have to point out, again, we have new members, that it is this committee's responsibility to make a recommendation to council, not staff. Staff provide advice, and it's very important. But the process of making a recommendation really gives the responsibility to this committee. And if we simply act as a rubber stamp committee for staff recommendations, then we're all wasting our time. Okay, secondly, I'm also concerned that when staff have recommended approval, that when whatever happens here goes to council, the staff recommendation goes to council too. So councilors will see the staff recommendation, they'll see our recommendation, whatever it is, but they will probably not see the minutes of this meeting to know how we got there, and they will probably not read every word of the staff report that we've seen and so on. So it's easy for councilors, many of whom don't know, not very knowledgeable about heritage, will say, if it's okay with staff, it must be okay. So I think this committee has to be careful to follow procedures that the Ontario Heritage Act requires for properties. I mean, this is our responsibility. So here we are with a difficult problem. I think basically there are two main problems. One is the vinyl material, and the other is the location. And for now, I think I'll just speak to the vinyl material business, and I'll make an amendment if that's all right, Mr. Chair. In the 20 years or so that I've been on this committee, and other people have been on it longer, the committee has never approved vinyl siding on a heritage property. Yet staff think that's okay. I have to disagree. And yeah, I understand alternatives may have some disadvantages. No material is perfect. No material is maintenance free. No material lasts forever. Good wood siding or cement board material doesn't need much maintenance. Every 10 or 20 years, it might need some maintenance, but having done that, it looks as good as new. That's not the case for vinyl. It simply gradually deteriorates. It can't be maintained. It has to be replaced. And nobody with, so say, heritage experience has provided any input saying that vinyl is okay. So, I think it is an important matter, and so I'm going to propose an amendment, which I've given to Elizabeth as follows: that a new condition, I think condition 8, that applicants shall substitute the heritage appropriate cladding for the proposed vinyl cladding. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, do we have that on screen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to ask my colleague Ian, he does have the wording, if he can set it up for us. Thank you.
So an amendment there that the recommendation with respect to 1403 Highway 15 be amended to add a new condition which reads as follows: the applicants shall substitute a heritage appropriate cladding for the proposed vinyl cladding. Looking for a seconder for that amendment. And seeing Jane McFarlane seconding it. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder what is meant by heritage appropriate. There's been a lot of changes in siding. And you're correct, like wood siding nowadays it requires minimal, if any, kind of maintenance in the first 20 or so years. It's really been improved. But we also have fiber cement siding, and even vinyl siding has changed a lot. Like, it used to be very obvious from the street that something was vinyl because it's just spoke of cheap and nasty. But vinyl has also changed. So what do we as a group understand by the words of heritage appropriate?
Don, can you give us an explanation on that? You're muted. Thank you.
It's difficult to go over everything, but I would suggest that a good reference would be the guidelines in the Heritage Conservation District, such as the Berryfield District. If this building were in Berryfield, vinyl cladding would be prohibited, no question. It would never come to a committee. And, can anybody say why this important part for a building should be treated less respectfully than properties in Berryfield District, for instance? But I guess the applicants could use the Berryfield guidelines as a suggestion, or they can talk to staff. I mean, I think staff are quite knowledgeable on these different materials. So all I'm saying is, I'm just echoing what's in the Berryfield District plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that okay, Councillor Doherty? Good, thank you. Other questions, comments? Councillor Oosterhoff?
Yeah, I can appreciate the concerns about the siding. I'm just wondering with staff, how in any of the discussions with the owners, was there any advising that this might be an issue for Heritage, and to do some budget considerations for a more appropriate siding and recognizing that the significance of the property? Was there any discussion?
Alex?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly there was discussion with the applicants. I provided several examples of composite products, which I thought, I think as Councillor Doherty mentioned, I mean, a lot of these products have come a long way, and there are a lot of new products. I've been researching some of them for personal projects, so I'm starting to get samples together. And certainly I hope in the future that we have a selection of samples down at the Heritage Resource Center so that people could start to actually look at them in real life, and we could actually as a group really start to understand that there are maybe more options than just traditional wood. So in terms of options for siding now, obviously there's composite wood, which is made of essentially post-consumer recycled fibers that are pressed together with resin and have a factory applied paint. So they have much longer finish warranties than say, for example, Maybach wood siding. So certainly we had a discussion about the different types of siding. The Timberins it sounded as if they had done their research with their contractor and looked at different price points. And also we're very confident that this specific vinyl product they've chosen is of a sort of higher quality vinyl, which is certainly true. I mean, there's even fire resistant vinyl these days. So I mean, definitely like the gauges and grades of vinyl has seriously improved over the last 30 years. And if I could just add, since I have the ability to talk to it now, in terms of the impact of vinyl on the heritage resource we're looking at, I think it's really important to make the point that this is not actually going on the heritage resource itself. Certainly it's in the context of the heritage building, but it is on a piece of new construction that is 45 feet away from the heritage building with trees in between. And certainly the setback from the road, even with a widening of Highway 15, as much as I believe I could professionally tell what the material is from that vantage point, I think if you canvassed most people in the general public from that distance with the quality of vinyl these days in a board and batten, particularly in the board and batten style, they would be hard pressed to tell the difference. So I just want to give that kind of context to the situation to appreciate that there are different thresholds for where we're seeing the vinyl located and on what type of building, and whether it's an actual heritage building or whether it's a piece of new construction. And certainly this is something that there hasn't been enough discussion on. And I think we need to do more development as a group as to which materials are appropriate and where, and there should be lots more discussion on it. But given our current kind of policy context and what we have to work with, this is where staff landed in this situation. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you through the chair. I just want to say I appreciate the comments from staff. I can see why they went there, and just changing some of my siding to, if you could turn my camera, you could see I just put that up on my house right now, and it is a good quality. And I guess that's the risk we take if we don't demand it, as this amendment sort of says, shall, then we don't know for sure. We're only hoping that they will go with a quality vinyl siding, which yeah, so I do understand it. So I'm a bit torn here, though I do appreciate the significant costs that would be, but there are other choices, and so thinking about it, but I do appreciate Mr. Taylor's comments. If he has said that this has never been approved, then that's also precedent. So and I don't think it's that big a project. So as well, from my, so I can understand why the committee is uneasy about it in this situation, though I won't support the location. I think that they have done their best to locate it there. That's another topic, but in this case, so is it a shall? Is it so we can make a shall to the clerk? A shall is
it's a shall substitute, but it's heritage appropriate. It doesn't mention a particular product or type of product, but it is shall substitute.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Yes, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let you know that Ms. O'Reilly does have her hand raised. I don't think you can see it from your screen.
No, I can't see the form
so
ones.
In case you wanted to. So
Yep.
Ms. O'Reilly, in order to unmute yourself, you'll need to press *6. Excellent.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, sorry, I actually did not have my hand raised.
Oh.
Sorry.
It may not have gone down from when you had it before, because I do see one hand. Yes, there, it's gone down now. Okay, thank you. And I see no further hands. Oh, I do see one. Jane McFarlane.
Thanks. I still don't support vinyl siding on a Part 4 heritage property, no matter where the building is. And I guess the other thing I put in my dash comment, and I don't know whether that was visited or not, and I'm trying to understand the size of the garage, which has 2 doors, but it's way bigger than a 2-car garage. And I'm thinking money could be saved by building a smaller garage and cladding it in pre-finished wood siding, and it would look really great. And if it were my property, I think I would scale down the building in order to get the appropriate material, heritage appropriate material. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Donald Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I have I think 2 thoughts. One is I think location and choice of materials is somewhat linked, because if it's better screened and if it's not visible, I think I have less concerns about the material, notwithstanding my recognition that there are members on this committee who have a far superior understanding of appropriate choices of material. My second question may get me into a bit of hot water, I guess, but I as a person on this committee, I don't believe the decision should be made by me politically, really. I'm trying to look at the information that I have and make the best determination on that information as one person who's making a recommendation to council. But I have concern about, and maybe this is out of scope, but I have concern about cost. And as a committee member, I'm a little concerned at, this is a slippery slope, but I'm a little concerned about if we recommend scaling back a project to save money to do an appropriate siding, or that we would say we'll use this type of siding because that's heritage appropriate as opposed to that. And I know we're in a real gray area, but I just wondered whether, for the benefit of making a decision, can staff comment on how that cost aspect works with the city? Because my other experience on other city committees, cost is not allowed to be a criteria or an issue, but you're meeting very clear standards and legislations. And in this instance, I'm not totally clear about the vinyl being 100% standard. I get in Berryfield, I'm not totally certain with part 4. So maybe staff could speak to that.
Alex, any comments there, or Ryan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's an interesting, it's a very relevant and interesting question. Certainly, and maybe I'll begin, and if either any of my other colleagues want to add in, I would welcome their input as well. Certainly, when we're looking at our policy and our best practice, the standards and guidelines, the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, and our local policy, we are looking at it strictly from a impact and assessing impact to the heritage asset. We aren't thinking in terms of the cost of the work to be completed. So the first, your first filter is simply from looking at the policy and assessing the application in terms of those policies and going through the relevant policies. In terms of cost, I'm not sure if we are, I don't know how to answer the question whether or not we're allowed to think of cost, but I think naturally as, compassionate individuals and being empathetic, of course, I certainly do think of the cost, and I imagine, what our comments may mean to an applicant and how that may affect how they can or can't carry out their project. But that's not how we make our decision at the end of the day, but it's certainly something that goes through our minds. And I imagine most planners have those thoughts. And of course, we want to encourage really good heritage conservation. We want to ensure that heritage property owners feel supported and that people want to have their properties designated, which can be a hard sell at times. So of course, we have all of that in our minds on balance, and we want people to feel involved and understand what it is we're looking for when we're trying to conserve heritage resources. So I'm not sure if that answers all of your question. If any of my colleagues want to add in, now would be a good time. Otherwise, I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Further discussion. Oh, Jennifer Campbell.
Sorry, and thank you. I just wanted to add to what Alex was sharing. I think it's important to note for the committee that the consideration of cost is certainly something that comes up with applicants at the time in the discussions with staff, but those considerations of cost are within what would be approved within the standards and guidelines in the application of applicable policies. So if there is possibility within and to meet those thresholds, there can certainly be a staff supported consideration of cost. But certainly we are trying to apply those standards and policies and to support and ensure that the decision-making really does fall within those guidelines and the thresholds established in them. So that's really what the effort is. And again, just to echo Alex, in discussions with applicants, cost is certainly something that does come up, but staff are not in the position to argue that cost justifies to step outside of those guidelines or those thresholds. That certainly could be a consideration of council, but it is not a consideration of staff. So we want to ensure we're within the policies, the guidelines, and the standards from a professional expertise and support position. Consideration of cost can be part of that. The consideration of cost is not something that promotes or encourages or staff would support moving outside of those standards, guidelines, and policies. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I forget who asked that question. Was that Don? Does that give you answers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess only follow-up would be, and Mr. Taylor sort of spoken to this already, but one would want to be absolutely certain that vinyl is absolutely not, I mean, I would prefer we were absolutely certain that it says vinyl shall not be used in this particular application. And I don't know I've heard it that clearly, but that would be my follow-up question if someone can answer that.
Well, it presently says a heritage appropriate cladding, and we have it on record that that means one that is approved by the Heritage Conservation District guidelines. So I think that probably answers to you, yes. Don Taylor, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I could add a couple of comments. I guess if you read the Fairfield guidelines carefully, and this is from memory, but I think it maybe does say for a building which is not a heritage building and an addition that is not visible to the public, that vinyl cladding might be acceptable. So there is a bit of wiggle room for vinyl in some cases. And I certainly would be reluctant to approve a vinyl clad garage anywhere on this property. But if it really was right at the back where hardly anybody could ever see it, then I guess I could be willing to see that, to approve that. But this is not the case here. This garage is very, very visible. And I want to say, not just to people driving by or even walking by, but the owner, every time he drives up the driveway, he sees a beautiful heritage farmhouse on the left and a modern vinyl garage on the right. That to me, if I were the owner, I would really, really not enjoy that experience. And that's why, I haven't discussed location very much. That's why I think I would say either, if the garage stays where it is, it really should look as if it belongs there, rather than a modern suburban style, modern material garage. If it's going to be there, then it should be compatible with the heritage character of the property. If it's not going to be that way, then it should be hidden as much as possible and moved back. And I think there are possibilities, even though the owners may think otherwise, but it'd be good to explore other possibilities. And I guess, one final thing about costs, it's important for many applicants and certainly sympathetic. I think we're often blamed for making things expensive for heritage property owners, but in many cases, that really is not the case. What we often tell the owners is, don't replace those windows, they can be repaired. Don't replace that door, it can be repaired. And in the case of vinyl, it's, my impression is it should be, have to be replaced after 20 years, whereas a higher quality material will last hundreds of years if it's decently maintained and be more economical in the long run. So this business of costs is a very tricky one, and I'm certainly not sort of sympathetic to applicants who say we must use this material because it's the cheapest, or we want to use it because it's the cheapest. It's much more complex.
Thank you. That should close discussion on this amendment, unless there is anybody who feels they have been left out. And not seeing any. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if it's appropriate for the applicant to speak to the amendment too, because I've noticed the applicant has had or the applicants have had their hands up.
I would say no. I would say this is the discussion for the members, but Madam Clerk, I'll take your advice on this.
Mr. Chair, it is your discretion who is given the floor, although it is supposed to be members only for deliberations. It is within your discretion to allow
I think,
someone else to speak.
Good, thank you. I think we stay with members only. We just open up too big a can of worms if we don't. So the amendment moved by Don Taylor and seconded by Jane reads that applicants shall substitute a heritage appropriate cladding for the proposed vinyl cladding. A heritage appropriate cladding for the proposed vinyl cladding. Those in favour, if you can raise your hand. And Janine, you're going to vote somehow. 3, 4, 5, 6. And those opposed? And Madam Clerk, I need a vote from Janine.
Ms. O'Reilly, I see that you're unmuted. Would you like to say which way you would like to vote? Sorry, Ms. O'Reilly, I think you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Are you still there?
Yes, I can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm very sorry. Yes, I vote in favor.
Thank you. That isn't those voting against. So that is 8-0 to add on that amendment. Further discussion on the amended recommendation? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciated Mr. Taylor's comments when this motion was first put on the floor. I think it was very helpful. It was helpful for me, and I'm sure it was very helpful for the new committee members too. And it really made me think about the importance of training and induction for new members, but also ongoing training for existing members. And I know we spoke about this a couple of years ago as well. And when I say ongoing training for committee members, I would suggest that maybe from this discussion, perhaps staff could organize some training. It would be better when we're in person again, but training around an education session around siding and the new products that are out there and the changes, because things are constantly changing, and I think it would be helpful for all of us as we're trying to make some tough decisions to really understand what's out there. So I just would like to put that on there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We're back to the amended motion. Any further discussion, Donald Mitchell?
Just very quickly about location, I can only go off the information that we've been given, but I do think that there were superior location choices that would have allowed access to a garage off the existing driveway turnaround. Based on the information I have, there are no trees that are in the way of that. I do think that the setback from the south boundary could have been exploited or used, and I don't think there would have been a lot of resistance to that. So I had originally come with the idea that I would bring forward an amendment to have a condition on the location, but I think I'm going to let that go. And I just wanted to explain the rationale to me anyway, which is that if it's going to be sided in a heritage appropriate material, then from my perspective, the location then becomes less of an issue. But I do think that there was a relationship between the material cladding and the location, that they may have got a superior decision maybe, or a better decision. And I would just come back to Mr. Taylor's comment about at inception of a project, getting that critical advice from people who make these kinds of decisions all the time. I can think of former members that are on the committee who are architects, et cetera, who really seem to know how to get down to the best decision. But I'm not going to raise that amendment, and I would support this as it is amended.
Thank you very much. I believe, and I've been trying to read one and listen at the same time, that there is actually no clause on the placement. And if the applicants and staff, having heard the discussion, may want to change that, I don't think it's a problem. So I appreciate that. So we now have an amended motion as printed, but with clause 8. Further discussion? Don Taylor?
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep continuing this discussion, but I guess I'm sorry that Mitchell has decided not to raise the location issue because although we may now have a garage with a better cladding than originally proposed, we have no idea what that cladding is. It could well be nothing very compatible, not as compatible with the farmhouse as we would like, and the present, at present the location is really, to my mind, very detracting from the house. From the street, you see these huge garage doors, and they are not going to be screened. And so instead of the sort of heritage landscape, if you like, of the farmhouse and so on, you see a modern suburban style garage. Cladding's okay, but it's still got big garage doors, huge garage doors. And again, it is, in my mind, it is not as sympathetic to the farmhouse as we should expect in a Part 4 property. So it's up to Mr. Mitchell, of course, but I think at one point the applicant said something like, if the 4.5 meter setback were relaxed, then he would be comfortable with moving the garage back. Well, I mean, I think there are those variables that we need to allow to explore. If we pass it as it is, then the garage is going to be exactly where it shows on the plans. And I think that is unfortunate. It will look like a big suburban garage right beside the heritage farmhouse. And to me, that would be very disappointing.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? And seeing none, then the motion is amended with clause 8, moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Oosterhoff. Ask you to vote. Those in favour of the amended motion? Those opposed to the amended motion? And I need a vote from Janine. Madam Clerk, can we get a vote from Janine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, Ms. O'Reilly, you look like you are unmuted. If you could let us know which way you would like to vote, please.
I am in favor.
Okay, thank you. That carries 6 votes to 2. Thank you all for that, applicants, etc. We move on to 274 Johnson Street. Who is looking after this one? Oh, it's a garage, so that'll be you, won't it?
Definitely me again. All right, so a slightly different context with a slightly different proposal up next. It's an application for alteration under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act for 274 Johnson Street, which is a Part 5 designation, the old Sydenham HCD. Next slide, please. So 274 Johnson is located on the south side of Johnson Street between Barrie and Clergy Streets. The existing stone outbuilding garage is located to the rear of the property and adjacent to the laneway that connects Barrie and Clergy Streets. You can see it there circled in the red. So that's the actual part of the property that we are discussing for this application. Next slide, please. Property contains a 2-story brick house, which was constructed by 1875 as part of the Wesley Terrace. Next slide. But the part of the property that we are discussing is this existing stone outbuilding. The construction date is unknown, but its limestone rubble construction would suggest to me professionally that it was built around the same time as the existing house. So sometime around 1875 or shortly thereafter. Next slide, please. So the property was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1976, as amended by bylaw 8892 in 1976 to expand the reasons for designation, and it was subsequently designated in 2015 as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. So certainly a much protected and much beloved row of houses. The bylaw number 8892 describes Wesley Terrace as a handsome row of brick-faced dwellings across from St. Mary's Roman Catholic Cathedral and the Bishop's Palace. It was built for William Anglin and named by him, although it was sometimes referred to as Tossel's buildings. This is an excellent example of a quality of row on a good residential street. It is mainly unaltered. And I'll leave you with the following description, which includes many more updates in terms of sort of individual heritage attributes of the terrace. Next slide, please. So staff visited this property on May 13th. And given the row house form of the Wesley Terrace on Johnson Street, the outbuilding is not visible from Johnson Street, but it can be viewed from the east and west along the rear laneway. So neither the Part 4 designation or the property inventory form identify or describe this existing stone outbuilding to the rear of 274 Johnson Street. However, section 2.3.3 of the Old Sydenham HCD plan contains a list of the heritage attributes for the Beyond Bagot sub-area, which does list rear lanes on some blocks with outbuildings as a heritage attribute of that sub-area. Unquestionably, the stone outbuilding's presence and visibility on the laneway contributes to the character of the Old Sydenham HCD, and as well as the public's experience of the district. The Old Sydenham plan does not contemplate or provide detailed guidance for the alteration of historic outbuildings in the district. However, in assessing the proposed alterations, staff utilized section 7.2 general guidelines for streetscapes and landscapes, section 5.3.2 windows, 5.3.3 cladding, the city's policy for window renovations, as well as the city's policy for masonry restoration. The general guidelines for streetscapes and landscapes acknowledges that laneways are important heritage attributes of the district and should be recognized as rights of way, which may provide access to private rear yards, accessory structures, and parking areas. The proposal to renovate the exterior of this stone outbuilding will continue to support the function of the adjacent laneway in the same way that the laneway supports the use of this outbuilding. The renovations to the exterior largely represent preservation and rehabilitation activities as defined by Parks Canada's standards and guidelines. The proposal to repoint the masonry as needed and to rebuild the frame wall will improve the water tightness of the building envelope. The proposal to widen the existing garage door opening will allow the outbuilding to comfortably accommodate 2 vehicles and continue to provide a useful function for the primary dwelling. In other words, the proposed improvements will ensure the long-term conservation of this historic outbuilding, which in turn supports the conservation use of the historic laneway, an identified heritage attribute of the district. Next slide, please. So in terms of the detailing of the proposal, the outbuilding appears to have had one existing opening on the 2nd floor of the south elevation at one point in time, though it is now boarded over, as you can see in the photo to the left there. Section 5.3.2 of the plan advises against creating new window openings for windows on facades visible from the street. However, staff believe that the intent of this guideline is referencing Johnson Street in the context of the HCD plan and was not considering or referencing new window openings facing rear laneways. Accordingly, staff have assessed the impact of the new openings on the character of the outbuilding and laneway as a secondary street. The 3 new window openings in the rebuilt frame wall on the second floor are aligned symmetrically within the composition of the south elevation and are narrow and tall in their proportions. Although not viewed directly in relation to the main house, this symmetry and vertical emphasis, which is characteristic of the classical style of the main house, is well reflected in the outbuilding. The proposed windows are 1/1 Marvin fiberglass windows, which comply with section 5.3.2 of the plan and with the city's policy on window renovations in heritage buildings. Section 5.3.3 of the plan addresses cladding on heritage buildings. This outbuilding is constructed of rubble stone masonry, and the proposal includes repointing the masonry joints as needed. This will maintain one of the key heritage attributes, the limestone walls of the outbuilding. There's also an existing section of frame wall on the second floor, which is in poor repair and proposed to be rebuilt. It is currently clad in wood siding. The proposal is to clad the rebuilt wall in a vertical V-groove wood siding. Section 5.3.3 advises that horizontal siding is preferred to board and batten. However, given that this is an outbuilding and not the primary house, the vertical orientation of the wood siding is appropriate. Additionally, wood is a traditional building material and will be complementary to the adjacent limestone walls. The application also proposes the enlargement of the existing garage door opening, which is due to the fact that the applicant wishes to comfortably accommodate 2 vehicles, and at present the current opening is not sufficiently sized. This proposal will necessitate the removal of a portion of stone wall at the ground and second floors. Given the relatively small portion of wall to be removed and the improved modern functionality of the garage outbuilding, this seems to be an acceptable loss. Stone will continue to be the primary building material and a key expression of its character. A condition has been included that the property owners salvage the dismantled stones for future use on the property or for other heritage conservation activities in the city. The surrounding structural frame to the opening will either be concrete or parched blockwork. The enlarged opening will require a new garage door, which should be simple and restrained in its design. A condition has been included that the detailed garage door design be submitted to staff for their review to ensure its compatibility with the heritage character of the building. Next slide, please. So the last 2 components of this proposal include the repair of the roof and repointing of the stone masonry. So when I was on site, I did notice some sagging in the current roof and damage to the wooden eave. The existing roof is a simple metal sheet roof and appears heavily worn. The applicant is proposing to repair the roof structure and install black asphalt roofing to match that on the main house and to repair the wooden eaves and like-for-like detailing as needed. This proposal will maintain the simple and unadored outbuilding character of the garage and laneway. However, staff have included a condition requiring that plain or solid dark colored asphalt shingles are used, again, as opposed to the variegated or architectural versions. In terms of the limestone masonry wall, staff did not observe any large areas of missing mortar on the south or east elevations where visible from the public realm. However, the widening of the garage door and rebuilding the frame wall will necessitate some repointing work at these junctures. In terms of comments from our Heritage Committee, largely the committee members that responded had no concerns with the proposal. One member did comment that the loss of a portion of the stone masonry is unfortunate, but that the widening of the opening for 2 vehicles is understandable. Another member commented that the salvaged stones could be used for future repairs or landscaping on the property, and accordingly staff included such a condition. Lastly, a member commented that the design of the garage door should include simple flat panels with divided windows that break up the impression of a long horizontal expansive window. Again, staff have included a condition that the finalized design of the garage door be submitted for review. So in summary, the proposed alterations will conserve the cultural heritage value and attributes of the outbuilding as well as of the Old Sydenham district. The alterations are oriented towards the laneway and will have no impact on the cultural heritage value or attributes of the main house. The alterations will conserve both the built heritage fabric of this building as well as its functionality over the long term, thereby sustaining the historic use of this laneway in the district. Before you, we have a recommendation on the next slide for approval of the application, subject to several conditions on the following slide. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Alex. Members, can you confirm that your dash comment, or if we go the other way around, does anybody object to the way their dash comment has been printed? Seems to be the faster way of doing it, and seeing no objections there. Members of the public, and I believe Matt Gervin, as agent, is here as well. Anybody wish to make comments? And I'm not seeing any hands.
Mr. Chair, I do see Matt Gervin.
Oh, Mac, you're waving down there. Sorry, I'm looking at the other side of the screen. Sorry, Mac. Okay, unmute and off you go. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Just have a few comments. I think the analysis of the project was done quite well by Alex. They did have to move that telephone pole to the left of the garage over to make the door large enough. they certainly would like to get 2-car parking. They actually even applied for an on-street parking spot, and they were turned down for some reason. I don't really know the backup on that. I think this will really clean up the back of the site, although we're losing a bit of limestone on the left. If you notice in the photograph of the existing of what it looks at now, that vertical crappy siding that is over top of the garage door now covers actually the right hand end of that wall. So we would be removing that and repointing that wall above, which I think will give a nice balance to the garage and clean up that line. So I think that's all I had to say. Thank you very much. I'm here for questions if you have any.
Good. Thank you very much indeed, Mac. Other members of the public? See, Valers are here as well.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to remind members of the public, if they wish to speak at this time, they will have to raise their hand. And for those who are joining us via the phone, you will need to press *9 in order to speak. And I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
I'm not seeing any at all. Okay, so committee members, questions? Oh, very good. Very, very good. Last chance. Okay. Oh, look at that big smile from Alex. That's any final comments? Anything that should be added into the report? Apart that we should be able to remove telephone poles. Don Taylor.
Yeah, well, I think this is, I'm very impressed with the plans and so on. That's good. And I note that although we're losing some stone on the left, we're gaining some stone on the right. In particular, I note that the new cladding between the stone is wood and not vinyl or some other product. Thank you.
Mac may even work out to move the stones on the right across to the stones on the left. We won't actually lose anything. Any other comments on that nice one? Okay, so you have a motion with 7 recommendations and 9 conditions, looking for a mover, and that is Don Taylor, and looking for a seconder. Looking for a seconder. Oh, that's Donald Mitchell. Thank you very much indeed. We cannot amend, we cannot defer. Any final thoughts, comments? Seeing none, then we'll ask you to vote, please. Those in favour of the approval, the motion as printed. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and Janine. Elizabeth is getting hold of her.
Ms. O'Reilly, you are unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Janine, do you want to cast the vote, yes or no?
Hello, yes?
You're voting in favour?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. So that vote is 8-0. It is approved. Thank you very much, Mac, and all who were involved in that. We move on to 2 Sharman's Lane. Ryan, is that you?
That is me, Mr. Chair.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the application that we're looking at this morning is in Berryfield. It's 2 Sharman's Lane. It's a property, well, let's go to the next slide, please. It's located on the east side of Sharman's Lane, between Regent and James in beautiful downtown Berryfield. It's, next slide, please. The property includes an 1888 2-story frame dwelling known as the Hutton House. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, it is designated Part 5 in 1979 as part of the Berryfield District, which was amended in 2016. It's classified as a heritage building in the plan. And some of the attributes that are noted in the inventory include its frame construction, its 2-story massing, the gable roof, the rectangular plan, the rectangular window and door openings, the horizontal cladding, and the stone foundation. And I would note that the rear wing addition was built in 1990, is not noted as a heritage attribute. So next slide, please. And what we're looking at this morning is an application under Section 42 or Part 5 of the Act in order to request approval to add 2 single-story shed roof additions to the rear or the east side of the dwelling. Next slide, please. The additions will flank the existing 2-story rear tail, which I mentioned was built in 1990 on the north and south sides of the tail. They'll be clad in vertical wood siding. However, the applicants are open to other wood siding options with asphalt shingled roof in colors that match the existing dwelling. Each addition will include 1 wooden sash window facing east, and the south addition will include the reuse of the existing door on the south elevation. Next slide, please. So in terms of our analysis, the proposed works are required to be undertaken in accordance with the Village of Berryfield Heritage Conservation District Plan, and in order to ensure that the new additions complement and enhance the district. The assessment was undertaken and is summarized in staff's report. I won't go through every aspect, but just the high points are Section 4, which have to do with new construction and alterations to heritage buildings. The most prominent section being 4.3, which has to do with additions to heritage buildings. And in Section 4.3, it provides guidelines and the policies that help in designing additions with minimal impacts to the cultural value of the district. Section 4.3.1 outlines the preferred location, height, and massing for new additions, noting that new additions should be lower in height than the heritage buildings and located away from the publicly visible elevations of the main building. There's actually an illustration included in the plan on page 29 that depicts desirable additions in the district, which are located at the rear of the heritage building, built at lower subservient scales, and are minimally visible. And actually the proposed new addition will be a 1-story, largely screened from the public view by the existing building, and is actually located in a very similar fashion to what's illustrated in the district plan. In summary, our analysis have concluded that the proposal upholds the policies and the guidelines of the district plan and its objectives, as well as those goals and objectives in the official plan and the best practices from both provincial and federal levels. In terms of our circulations and comments, we received a number of them from internal departments, Mr. Chair. Our building permits required from building staff, the standard comments regarding identifying designated substances and managing excess of soil and waste was provided from our colleagues in the environment section. Planning noted that a plot plan is required to confirm zoning compliance. We did flag a number of zoning requirements that will need to be addressed, possibly through a minor variance application, but a full zoning review will be completed at a building permit stage. And this committee also provided some comments, which are outlined in Exhibit D, and the members that provided comments were supportive of the proposal. So, Mr. Chair, staff recommend approval. Next slide, please. And there are, I think, 6 conditions that go along with those, our recommendation, and available for questions. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much, Mr. Leary. Members, can you confirm or can you say if your dash comments were not correctly reproduced? And seeing no, I never have had a complaint about those. Members of the public, including the agents who may wish to speak on this, raise your hand and we will acknowledge you and get you speaking. And I am not seeing.
Hi.
James Price. It isn't James Price, though. You are?
Raylene Young.
Okay, thank you.
My husband couldn't be with us.
No, that's fine. I only get one name on the screen. I knew it wasn't James Price.
Yeah, super. I was just here to answer any additional questions. We've read all your comments and appreciate all of them. It's our first time applying for a heritage permit. We've been the homeowners there for a number of years, but we're currently in London, England, posted here for work, but we're returning to the village the end of the summer and super excited to be part of the neighborhood again. And yeah, so just wanted to tune in to see if there was any questions.
Okay, well, thank you and welcome back. Questions, comments from the committee? I'm guessing there's not going to be very much because it was all positive that was written. And last chance for anybody to speak, and not seeing anybody at all. So I think you've got away. Hope you didn't come all the way back just to get no questions. Committee members, do you have anything? No.
Sorry, I didn't come back. I didn't mean to give that impression.
Oh, good.
I'm in England now.
Oh, you're there. Oh, well, very good. Okay. Committee members, do you have any questions? I think we see that as clear then. Committee members' final comments that need to go to staff. And my comment, Ryan, would be that wonderful photograph you have of the back of the property, which is all trees. I like that picture showing how well the property can be seen from the next street. I need a motion then to move and second the recommendation and the 6 conditions. So looking for a mover. Jane McFarlane, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Final comments? Seeing none, then we will ask for those in favour to raise your hands. And can I get Janine's vote?
I'm in favor.
Thank you very much. So that's 8-0. That will be carried and the recommendation sent on to council. So thank you very much for being part of this, Raylene, and we look forward to seeing you later.
Thank you all for your time. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to I just want to get the wording right here. Pre-consultation on 81 Gore Street. And for those 2 new committee members, and to remind you of what this happened last time, this will not end up with a vote. This started in the days when applicants wanted to get ahead before they did any planning to get some idea of how the committee would react to what they were trying to do. You'll remember that last month we did this with the proposed subdivision in Berryfield, where there were absolutely no suggestions really as to details, but simply a general concept, and they heard your comments. So this time we're looking at 81 Gore Street. We really don't have guidelines for these, so I'm going to follow the regular Part 5 guidelines. A number of committee have made comments. And I presume that staff, is that you, Ryan, is going to introduce this one? Good, thank you.
Yes, it is me, Mr. Chair. I would only add to your comment that we're hoping and encouraging the applicant or the committee to provide some constructive feedback and comments on this application, perhaps a little more or less structured than a Part 5 application is. Okay. The purpose of this, well, and I'll explain it here in just a sec. So before I hand it over to the applicants, I wanted to just sort of give the committee a brief orientation here. So the property is at 81 Gore. It's on the north side of Gore Street between King and Wellington. It's sort of mid-block. The property includes a 2-story brick-clad dwelling built in the 1850s. The property was designated as part of the district under Part 5, and it's noted, or it's rated as a significant contribution, or significant building to the district and its contribution. So what the applicants are going to show you today is an application where they're seeking preliminary feedback for a proposed renovation to enlarge the existing dwelling. There are a number of supporting letters that were received by a number of nearby neighbors, property owners. They have been included in Dash. They're also in Exhibit D of staff's covering report and in the addendum of today's agenda. The proponents have also provided their own letter of response to comments received from the committee, and that's attached, I believe, in correspondence of today's agenda. We also received one letter of objection from the Frontenac Heritage Foundation, which is also included in your addendum. And while we understand the desire of the applicants to enlarge their dwelling to accommodate their growing family, the focus of today's meeting is strictly on the heritage compatibility of this proposal, and they're looking for feedback on that. And in that, I would note that we did include a number of technical comments, basically for the committee, for the applicants' knowledge, and they can take away and consider. We also provided some preliminary staff comments from Heritage Services. We did note that alterations and additions to heritage buildings in the Old Sydenham District must conform to the policies of the plan. We have identified a number of policies in the HCD plan that specific attention should be given to, and to which a conflict appears to be present. And those are specifically noted as section 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4, as noted in the plan. And I won't go into real detail, but I would note that as the committee is aware, of course, approvals for alterations in heritage buildings in a district under Part 5 do not require consultation with the committee. So today's application is an opportunity for the committee to provide suggestions and comments on the compatibility of the proposal from a heritage conservation perspective directly to the applicants, and to share their support or concerns for the proponent's plans, in hopes that when submitted, we have a supportable and complete application that staff can bring back for committee's endorsement. And we'd like to thank the members who have already submitted written comments in advance. They are included in your agenda under Exhibit E. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to turn that over to the applicants, their agents, and I believe consultant Dr. Letourneau also has a presentation on their behalf. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Devin, I will go first if you wanted to speak after I finish. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Marcus, welcome.
Thank you. Staff, members of the committee. As most of you know, my name is Mark Letourneau. I'm here today working with the applicant to, at this stage, receive feedback, and we would like to thank everyone for the comments received to date. At this stage, as Mr. Leary has indicated, our interest is getting as much feedback as possible to look at the design, look at opportunities for the design. We do have a couple of questions that we will pose at the end of our presentation that we would like to get some specific feedback on, that we saw that would build on the comments received to date. So next, I don't know if I can advance the slides or if someone has to. These are just sort of some of the photos of the existing conditions. As noted by Mr. Leary, this is a 2-story brick structure. It is on Gore Street within the Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. This is sort of just a general picture of some of the existing conditions. We would note that there is variation in height along the street that varies from 3 stories. I believe there is 1 story, so there is that variation on the street. There is existing street trees, existing street vegetation. Next slide, please. This is, I always find this useful myself. This is from the HCD inventory description. So what we've actually done is try to take those heritage attributes and sort of represent them within the photo. So the attributes on the structure were, I would say, actually a bit limited. It makes a reference to the brick facade, and in the history of the property, there is some question of, is this original or was this added later? The flat arches of yellow brick over the 1st-story windows, the 2-story structure, the rectangular windows on the 2nd story. There is some discussion about the roof, but it only references the roof as a side gable roof. There isn't actually a reference to a specific slope. And this will lead into one of our questions. The next slide, please. So one of the things that I wanted to note is in working with the applicant, and we've been working with the applicant for a few weeks, is the concept that is being presented was an iterative process. This wasn't on their part just sort of a jump to a particular design. It was looking at a number of different options, and sort of, I'm just going to walk through these very, very quickly. On the bottom left is sort of the first concept, the second design. Next slide, please. Third design, fourth design, and then it came to the fifth design. Next slide, please, which is the current concept that is being presented to the committee for, again, feedback and comment. Next slide, please. This is Mark Peabody. As some of you may know, Mr. Peabody is the builder who has been involved with this project, who has developed some of the drawings. Todd, who is one of the people involved in the project, is here today, as is Davin, who is the property owner. Couple of the things you'll notice that the proposal is looking at changing the height of the gable roof, as well as adding in several new dormers. There is a side addition that is being proposed, but the facade of the building is not being proposed to change. Next slide, please. And this is sort of a slide elevation. There is currently, as noted in the staff report, a one-story addition, which by our research has been identified in about the 1970s. There's still some research there. And the effort was to sort of hide that addition from the facade so that it does not peak above the peak of the roof. So as you can see with some of the iteration, that was sort of the intent of moving it to this point. Next slide, please. One of the things that we wanted to note is in looking at the design and looking at some of the options, there was an effort to look at some of the current projects that have been undertaken within the district. We would note 83 King Street as an example of an existing structure that has had significant interventions that were done in a very sympathetic and secondary way. Next slide, please. But also, if you look in terms of what is being proposed, this proposal was developed by taking influence and inspiration from some of the other elements that would be found within the Heritage Conservation District, this particular style of dormers, that use of parapets, which is used widely within the district, the idea of the different slopes on the roofs. There was some discussion of would, for example, a Second Empire style roof addition be appropriate, which was done to a number of structures historically to change when often another story was being added. So these were some of the things that we were considering. So at this point, a couple of the questions that we would appreciate feedback on. We would like to get the committee's feedback on the idea of the addition at the rear, changes to that existing addition, what they would like to see, what would they like to see in terms of the materiality, are there concerns with the existing height, would there be comfort with the existing height if the roof pitch changed? And that leads into that second question. As noted, the roof is only identified as a heritage attribute as that side gable roof. Would the committee be open to the idea of a change to the pitch? If it would what type of pitch change would be considered appropriate? The dormers. We've had a lot of discussions about what is being proposed as sort of those two individual dormers. What we have seen approved in other applications in the past are the ideas of a shed dormer or a similar sort of structure, not quite a clear story, but sort of that sort of type of an addition on the roof. The parapet wall, is there support for the parapet wall? Is there a sense that the parapet wall would be inappropriate? And lastly, we would appreciate comments and feedback on the idea of the side addition from a heritage perspective. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the end of my initial comments. Davin, I don't know if you had any additional comments which you wanted to add.
You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it looks like, Mr. Johnson, it looks like you're unmuted. However, I think there is an issue with the audio. They're unable to hear you at this time. Do you want to try again, Mr. Johnson, to see if, yeah, we unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, if I could suggest if Mr. Johnson would like to exit the meeting and come back in to see if that resolves the audio.
Yep. Marcus, if you have anybody else you want to speak?
The only person that I might ask to speak is Todd Bigerman, who was one of the designers, to ask if he had anything to add to my comments.
Todd, do you want to add anything?
If not, as Mr. Leary has indicated, our interest today is getting as much feedback as possible.
Okay, well, committee comments. Donald Mitchell.
Sorry, actually, this is just a query. I've had encountered problems with my computer if you're plugging in speakers, that my computer is interpreting it that I have a microphone as a part of those speakers. And I wondered if Mr. Johnson actually had additional speakers plugged into the computer and whether if he unplugged them, his mic might actually be able to work.
High tech, very good. Well, let's go back to committee members with comments. I guess beyond the ones that have been printed already.
So can anybody hear me now?
Oh yes, that's good, Devin. Okay, off you go.
Okay, so sorry about that. So is there any way I can have the share screen feature enabled? I just have a couple of brief slides and pictures to show.
Ian, can we share screen from Devin? Elizabeth?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately at this point, we can't enable that for Mr. Johnson. However, if Mr. Johnson would like to send those to me via email, I could share those materials for him.
Okay, sorry for the delay. I'm doing it right now. I just sent there, Elizabeth.
Can you start without?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I'm going to try to be
until they
brief.
arrive.
First off, thank you for the opportunity to present, and thank you for those heritage members who provided us some initial feedback. So I'm going to try to be brief because I think, quite frankly, some dialogue is going to be more useful, and there's already a lot of documents that have already been uploaded onto the Dash system as well. So, I think that everybody is very clear with our motivations, which is obviously that we're seeking to expand the square footage of our home. We've lived on the Gore Street block for about 5 years now, and it's a really unique block. We're a very close-knit community. There's a lot of young families that have moved onto the block. And so, deciding, whether we're going to move or stay on the block, it's really our preference to be able to stay on the block. And so, about a year and a half ago, we started exploring the options of doing some alterations, and we recruited the help of Mark Peabody, who is a resident of Sydenham Ward, and he also has significant experience with renovating old properties. So there was a lot of considerations that went into our alterations. Obviously, heritage consideration is one that we took into account. As residents of Sydenham Ward, we can certainly appreciate the benefits of having heritage designation. Also, we wanted to take into account our family needs and the preferences of our neighbors as well. And finally, we have 2 old growth trees on our property, and we really wanted to preserve these as much as possible, especially with the loss of trees at 47 Wellington. So as Dr. Letourneau showed, we went through a lot of design iterations, and we settled on this one that we wanted to show the committee, which we felt balanced a lot of factors, and was the preference of our neighbors as well. So Elizabeth, I was going to show a couple pictures. Or did you manage to get that presentation?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, through you, unfortunately, I haven't received it yet through my email. Perhaps, Mr. Johnson, if you could try sending it again. And in the meantime, I understand that Mr. Bigerman is also joining us via phone, as he's currently on a computer that doesn't have a microphone. So, Mr. Chair, perhaps if we could permit Mr. Bigerman to speak as well to the application.
Okay.
And then I can see if I can get the materials up for Mr. Johnson.
So I think I'm going to wrap up soon. I think, Marcus already covered a lot of stuff here, but I'll just briefly add that, we're well aware that certain aspects of our project do not conform to the Old Cinnamore Heritage Conservation District plan. We're certainly not arguing this, but, our impression was that, there's other factors that can go into deciding whether a project gets approval. I mean, word for word from Bill 108, also known as More Homes, More Choice, says that decisions affecting the cultural heritage value or interest of a property or district should, among other things, demonstrate openness and transparency by considering the views of all interested persons and communities. So, as Ryan showed, we have garnered a lot of support from our neighbors. Just to clarify, we didn't, go canvassing around in our neighborhood asking for support, but people were aware that we were making this application. So I'll briefly touch on a couple of comments here and then wrap up. We've touched on a few comments already that were uploaded to Dash, but some of the themes was, whether there be a fear of precedent in Cinnamore, and secondary was the alteration of the streetscape. So I can certainly appreciate that there's a concern over precedent. I mean, if you allow a project like this to be approved, does that mean that other people in the block are going to want to do the same thing? And I can certainly sympathize with this, but I think it's a little bit overstated. I mean, it sort of implies that a lot of other people will want to do the same. Walking around Cinnamore, most houses are either significantly larger, already have a 3rd floor, or simply have no need to expand further based on the occupants. So I was going to show a map of the lot size, just to show as well that, unlike our neighbors at 73 Gore Street, which recently submitted some alterations, we don't have the capability to expand backwards. And so that's why we're hoping that this committee consider the potential for us to expand upwards. Now, one of the other themes was the alteration of the streetscape. So, undeniably, our house would look different from the street if we were allowed to have a top half story. Now, just keep in mind, though, that some arguments to support these changes would be that, we do have a lot of tree cover in the neighborhood, which does partially shield this. And this was an argument that was made for 81 King Street to allow their alterations to take place. Second is that our, 81 Gore Street has always been higher than the neighboring property at 77 and 79 Gore Street. This used to be a single-story house only. It was subsequently had a top half story added. And lastly, as I mentioned, there's a lot of families on the street, and although the official definition of streetscape is the physical buildings only, just keep in mind that there's a human element as well, and our street is really unique, and the families and so forth. And I was going to show some pictures of some of the events that we've had on our street. So just a couple of additional comments. I did look, and there's certainly some other properties that have been approved with deviations from the district plan for Cinnamore. So among others, these are 47 Wellington, 81 King Street, 79 William, 184 Bagot, and 225 King Street East. So, just to wrap up, directly from the district plan for Cinnamore, it says designation can identify the types of changes that suit neighborhood character and those that do not. So, we've spoken to some people about the the plan for Sydenham Ward and its interpretation. And there's obviously a lot of room for interpretation of the plan, but there are many people that feel that it wasn't necessarily made to have every alteration word for word satisfy all of the conditions, because we've tried to balance a lot of factors with this, like our neighbors and trees and heritage committee. So thank you for your time, and also thanks to Mr. Ryan Leary for guiding us through this process, and certainly we look forward to some discussion today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Todd, do you have anything to add?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Actually, it's still morning, sorry. It feels like afternoon. No, I just wanted to let the committee know that I'm here to answer any questions. Mr. Letourneau put forth a fine presentation on where we're at yet today.
Okay, thank you very much. In light of the time, I suspect that it may well be better for committee members to consider and write their comments. But at this point, are there questions or comments that you want to make right now? Don Taylor.
Well, I don't think I have much to add that I didn't already submit on Dash, and I hope the applicants are assured that we are sympathetic to their wishes, and we hope that they can come up with a solution that satisfies them and also satisfies the committee. But I think I want to call it the elephant in the room is the guideline that says there is a height limitation, and it is, I think, extremely dangerous to make exceptions for on a case-by-case business, because then we really don't have credible guidelines anymore. And yeah, I should also say that I'm familiar with the work of Mark Peabody and Todd Bigerman, and personally have great confidence in whatever they come forward with that will be appropriate to the streetscape and to the requirements of the district plan and so on. And so, as I say, I'm hopeful that something good will come out of this. I think the only other comment is that, if in my mind going higher is not, unfortunately, not acceptable. I really don't see that the committee should be recommending exceptions to that. As I did try to mention in one comment, that in some cases where height is limited, people have excavated deeper and put more space at a basement level and so on. So I hope that one way or another you can meet the your expectations and have a successful outcome.
Good, thank you, Don. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want to close this item without reminding the committee that this is their chance to provide some feedback to the applicants. And as the heritage planner that's managing this file, I would really appreciate some of your expertise on this particular matter. I note that the presentation included some earlier concepts, and I don't know if there's some opportunity or some comments that the committee would like to add to those. Maybe there's some suggestions that could help the proponents advance this concept a little more smoothly. And as I said earlier in my comments, that as a Part 5 application, there are limited opportunities when the full permit comes in for committee to have input. So this is your chance to directly converse with the applicants and provide some feedback. Dr. Letourneau actually asked 4 specific points that he was looking for feedback on, including the roof profile, which Member Taylor mentioned, as well as the design of the dormers the parapet wall and the proposed side addition. And I don't know if committee had some feedback or some thoughts on.
And I'll do it immediately. And I need more time to think over this, having heard what you've spoken about. And I suspect that other committee members are thinking the same. But it would be nice if you can send those to show us how you got to where you are now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe the clerk's office already has it.
Oh, excellent. So I'll ask Elizabeth sometime if you could circulate with Marcus's permission the other ones. Donald Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So it's difficult when you just see the documents that are on Dash and you go document by document and you work through that process. And my comments were based on that, and you have very little comprehensive background. And so the process of gathering the feedback of comments isn't a discussion, doesn't have a site visit, and it doesn't get into some of the nuance. But that said, I participated in the process of the creation of the Heritage District Plan because I had been managing one of the large properties up the street. And with Dr. Carl Bray and the public engagements and everything, there were a lot of there was a lot of work and a lot of comments that came out of that. And now when you look at the document, you don't necessarily see in the actual written language some of the nuance that I think is supposed to be there or is there. So you do find things that if you tease out language, you'll find that a backyard tree may or may not, based on the language, actually be protected. And especially a significant one that's very, very tall, you know, and is a shared attribute between many properties. So when I encountered your application, and I've since walked up and down the street many times, for a committee member, a number of things come up and people have spoken to them. So I'm going to talk at a fairly high level, which tends to be my nature anyway. But, you know, it's interesting to me that in planning, they talk about putting larger structures on bigger streets. They talk about larger structures being on the corners. And as you go down the street, the structure becomes smaller. You look at the space and the relationships between structures. So if there's 4 or 5 buildings that are all virtually fused, and then all of a sudden there's a small window or a gap or a way to experience that area differently. And you can go on, but there are all those different intangible attributes. And I believe that a lot of that was considered in the district plan. I also think that there was this idea of how development would unfold when the Heritage Plan was formed. And we all had both positive and negative kind of reactions to some of that. So, you know, with the property that we have, it would be nice to develop it, you know, and we have extreme height, you know, and I would love to, for fun, look at some of the possibilities of how you might develop our property. But the reality was, when we discussed it and we talked about the different things, we knew that there were upsides and downsides, but that we would be managed as a district, you know, and as one of the largest green spaces in the Heritage District, that was another consideration. What would happen to that green space someday? Does it belong to us? Does it belong to the community? So when I looked at your application and I looked at the my sense of the district plan, having read it several times, it was immediate flag for me that we were going to take one structure, which may come because of how things were developed prior to the district plan. It may actually be a unique building in comparison to some that have been altered and changed. And I think that's to be considered as well. What do we preserve to have a diverse stock and a diverse relationship? So when I approached those comments, immediately there were a number of big sort of flags that came up for me. And what would have helped would have been a heritage impact statement by someone who really understood a lot of that nuance. When I think of some of the things that Dr. Carl Bray got into in the formation of the district plan and some of the extreme heritage experts that Kingston possesses, you know, that they're not easy things to understand, but as a committee member at a high level, you hit those things. So So trees were consideration for me. Streetscape was a consideration for me. The gaps and those types of things, what you can see, what you can't see, the diversity of the built form and preserving that. And then at the same time, I looked at language that was talking about other hierarchies of planning. And sometimes I think if the provincial policy statement says we can do it, if the official plan says we can do it, if the zoning bylaw says we can do it, but the heritage district plan is more restrictive, it's somehow like at times it seems like people are balancing these all as equals, and I'm not sure they're intended to be balanced as equals. And in talking to provincial planners, they sometimes give different interpretations than we may hear locally. And so it was, it's a community conversation, and I'm sympathetic to the idea that change management in the Heritage District and the Heritage District plan itself may need further thought, may need revision, may need nuance. But when I sort of boil all that down for me, I have to say that if the current iteration came forward, I don't feel it's my place to rewrite, so to speak, the district plan. And I don't think the district plan supports what you're hoping to achieve. I think that other planning pieces do, but I also think those other planning pieces and the district plan and the Heritage Act and everything are all meant to be read in their entirety. And a decision is supposed to be made out of that. I'm not positive the committee can, on a case-by-case basis, truly give you a clear direction on that until some other real key experts have weighed in and have looked at a lot of what I would argue is the nuance of that. I think that what we see are some very clear reasons why the application that we evaluated on Dash isn't supportable at this moment. And that's why I thought development is possible, but there might be other ways to achieve it that would not so directly challenge what seem to be obvious attributes that are to be preserved that are in the plan. That's my take for what it's worth. And I'm hopeful you can find the solution that you need that's supportable by the whole group of stakeholders that weigh in. Thank you for your time.
Good, thank you, Don. Other members? Jane.
Hi, yeah, thanks for all that. Could I get someone to explain what the parapet wall is exactly that you want us to comment on? I think I've missed it, or.
Marcus, can you comment on the parapet wall, please?
Certainly. Elizabeth, can you bring up the presentation, please? So if we stop here, if you look at the edges of the roof, you can sort of see the raised wall portions. Okay. And that would be a little bit more evident within the other proposed images. But
Okay. So I've looked at your plans. I think a site visit would have been really helpful and some dialogue between us all. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now. I also find that the information that's on Dash is pretty limited because you don't have all of the subtle nuances of the plans, like where the water lines run, where the sewer lines are, and why the bathrooms, etc., are in certain places. But I guess what it boils down to for me is, what do you as the homeowners, what do you consider things that are essential in this addition, and what are things that might be nice to have? And I think that moving forward, in order to satisfy the old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District plan requirements, but to get what you need, I think you need, I would suggest, if it were me, I would look at what do I really have to have? Do I need 2 more bedrooms and a couple more bathrooms? And how can I get that? So I'm trying to come up with suggestions, but it's really difficult. And I would like to say, I'd like to look at the other plans that you had put forth. And I'd like you to think about what's essential. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Gavin, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, thank you for those thoughts. So I mean, heading forward, I just feel we don't have a whole lot of direction quite yet. And, you know, presumably at some point we'd like to get a plan that, you know, tries to satisfy a lot of parties so we can submit as an official application. So I just feel we don't have a whole lot of direction quite yet. Like, just to touch on what Dr. Letourneau mentioned, like, I guess my question is, if we make some concessions, does the committee, would they be flexible with any of the items in the Heritage Conservation District Plan? If, you know, like, what are things that are most important for the committee for us to change?
Does anybody want to give an answer to that question? Donald?
So I'll try to be brief to the questions. I would find it very difficult, and I'm very willing to accept and understand expertise from true heritage, long careered professionals, and then be able to look at that and then be able to work with that. So if you're talking about what I would call the negative space, or the open space between 2 dwellings, to me, that's a tangible or an intangible heritage attribute. So the distance with which your addition on the side is set back, and looking at that, you might come to some, and material choice and windows or no windows, you might come to some level then where you could say, okay, yes, I recognize that you're filling that void with now structure, but at the same time, you're doing it in a fashion that's supportable, that it doesn't compromise kind of what's there. And I still have a sense of a void. I still can see some tree, etc. But so that's one. I'm trying to be very concrete. The roof line for me is more problematic, and I recognize the weird world we're in, where a whole bunch of people may have made changes to dwellings prior to this district plan formation, and I can only go on when the plan was enacted, and these are the way the structures are. But it makes a difference to me if it's fronted on a major street, or if it's a different, and you've shown some comparisons, and some of those, it's a different magnitude of building, it's a different type of street, it's a different type of area. And so those, for me, those become very hard to discern moments about, would you contemplate additional height in one situation where you might not in another? And again, I think that for the committee, and likely for staff, you really kind of need that expertise and some leading of an explanation about why this increase of height would be appropriate, even though it's seemingly contrary to the Heritage District Plan. It's harder for me to look at intangible attributes like the impact or the potential obtrusive overlook on neighboring properties, et cetera. Or even, it's weird, but even the general support of an entire street, trying to context that with what you read in the district plan is very difficult. So I would encourage that those few ways that you want to be right up against and trying to find that interpretation of what the district plan says, I think the more professional expertise we can all get looking at it from all these different vantage points and the options would assist giving you clear direction on those particular aspects.
Good, thank you, Donald. Councillor Doherty.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I just wondered if staff could arrange a couple site plan visits because restrictions have changed, and I think it's possible now. Certainly it wasn't when this was first submitted.
Jennifer?
Thank you, and through you, certainly, Councillor Drury, we can take that away and explore what the current provisions and guidelines are, and discuss internally about what would be appropriate if a staff visit, if a site visit were able to be facilitated. There are a number of things that we want to connect on about that, so I don't want to confirm that as a next step at this time, because certainly we also want to coordinate with the applicant on what would be appropriate given the nature of the application, et cetera. But we can look into, certainly we'll start with the COVID guidelines, and then expand from there into what's reasonable given the kind of nature of the application.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer, for that, because I think it is critical. Those of us who have gone through site visits, it's totally different from sitting reading a piece of paper. Ted.
This is more a question. How taller will the new roof be than the existing roof?
Marcus, you're the best one to answer that.
Certainly, if we, can we load the presentation again? So if you, this diagram actually, if you look about the midpoint in the dormers, you can see the existing ridge line. It's the dotted line that's coming across the drawing.
Right.
The addition is above that.
Okay. So it's about 60% taller than it is now, let's say?
I was going to say 8 or 9 feet taller. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
At a rough guess. Good, thank you. Other questions? Jane.
I guess this might be a question for Todd. I'm just wondering why this plan is offset on the, I don't know, south side. So, and then you have the addition on the, is it north side? Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm just wondering why there's a bigger space so it doesn't follow the line of the original building back to the back. So that's my first question.
If Todd's not available, I can answer that. It's because it's 79 Gore Street.
I'm here.
Oh, go ahead, Todd.
But go ahead, Davin, if you understand the question. I would need this question restated, sorry.
I think it's because it's 79 Gore Street in the back of that property. The building is right along the property line. So Todd, the question was why the back extension was offset towards Wellington Street from King Street, and I was just mentioning it's because of we would be too close to 79 Gore, I believe.
That's right.
Okay, great.
I would, if I may, I would agree with Mr. Gower. That it always pains me to upload the 2D drawings of such a project that's so important like this. That I mean, I think a site visit is mandatory to really see what the impact of this project would have, and to answer that question that Ms. McFarland just asked.
Yeah,
right.
And thank you, Todd, for that. And I'll just add in, Jane, that I think, I mean, we've all been there, and being there means standing on the street and not going down on the property and not really looking around. And that is what is so critical to it all. So thank you for supporting that. Jane.
Yeah, I guess I'm going back to the 8 guiding principles in conservation of built heritage properties. And I'm thinking about number 6, which is reversibility. And if you, your alteration, can it be returned to the original? And I guess that's one of the difficulties I'm having with changing the roof profile. And, you know, if you had a dormer, it could go back, but when you actually change the whole roof profile, it is not reversible, basically. So I do have a concern with that, and I've looked at your plans and I've tried to think of, what you could do to come up with something that doesn't alter that front roof profile. So, I'm just putting that out there as a concern. And I'm wondering if any other staff could weigh in on just, the whole process of how we might approach this and the Heritage Conservation District. Thanks.
Oh, staff want to join in there?
Sorry, I just had a very quick response to you, Mr. Chair. For those of you who have been on the committee for a while, I would note that there have been examples of roof changes that have been designed to be reversible. So I point specifically to 186 Frontenac Street, which some of you may remember came to the committee now probably about 12 years ago, which was an addition designed to be reversible. So I would be very curious with some of the thoughts and with some of the feedback, if some consideration would be given to an addition, if we could explore some of those principles that were applied there.
Okay, thank you very much. I am looking at time. We're almost at 12 o'clock. I suspect some of us are getting somewhat exhausted and need that site visit desperately. But Ryan, do you want to comment? I forget what the question from Jane was now, that staff are going to make a comment on. Jane, what were they going to make us the comment on?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I just I thought that perhaps staff might give the Heritage Committee a little more guidance on where we're going to go from here. I don't think I can post another comment on Dash because I don't really have anything else to comment on. So I just would like to, I want to know what next steps are from someone.
Okay. Ryan, I've got Alex's hand up. Ryan or Alex, who wants to answer?
Well, I'm already unmuted, so I'll go quickly, Mr. Chair, and I'll let my counterpart speak. Well, at this point, the applicants and their agents are going to take this feedback back and consider it. I assume we'll be chatting again, that is staff and the applicants, and try to move this forward. At present, the heritage permit application is sitting incomplete. It's on hold until the applicants advise otherwise on how they wish to proceed. And then as Director Campbell mentioned, we'll certainly look into the option of a site visit. It sounds like that's something that committee is in favor of. And so we will definitely check into that. And so we'll be certainly in touch with the committee. If there's a revision, you'll be recirculated through Dash for updated comments, and we'll go from there. So.
And I would certainly strongly recommend committee members, having heard this morning's presentation, that if you have things to add, if you don't want to go through Dash, then simply do it as an email to Ryan and he will get it posted in the most appropriate way. And if you have come up with new comments, new questions, get them to him as well. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Ryan answered all those questions excellently. I just wanted to add that just from listening to all the discussion this morning on this application, I think one thing that would be incredibly helpful for the applicants would be to get some feedback on the first iterations of their design. I know that that's not the design that was brought to the table this morning, but yeah. I think for them, if you on your own time could look at that presentation very clearly and provide, consideration to how those may or may not respond to the district plan. And if you can even provide suggestions to help them comply with the district plan based on what you've heard this morning, I'm sure that would give them some really helpful thoughts to move themselves forward so they're not sort of stalled. Thank you for that time.
Good. Okay, thank you. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know that we do still have at least one member of the public present. And as this is a business item, we should be allowing members of the public to speak to it as well. I just wanted to check in before we were to wrap up this section, if anyone in the public wanted to speak to it. So again, I'm just going to remind those who are with us, if they'd like to speak to this application, those who are joining us on the computer will need to press the raise hand button in Zoom, and those who are joining us via phone will need to press *9 in order to raise their hand in Zoom to speak.
Okay, I'm not seeing any reactions there.
Me neither. Me neither.
Give committee members a last chance. And otherwise, I would thank, and I'm not sure what order we go in, but Davin and Marcus and Todd and Ryan for bringing this forward. It's a very difficult one, as you've seen, for a number of reasons. And we're now going to be thinking about it carefully. And we look forward, Marcus, to you, at least you've already sent them, look forward to Elizabeth, you circulating those earlier drawings of the iterations you went through before. And I would really encourage all committee members to review, rethink their earlier comments and submit them to Elizabeth or to Ryan. Which is the best way to go? Straight to Ryan?
I would say to me, Mr. Chair, and if you're ever intimidated by Dash, because I know it's a little challenging sometimes, please reach out to Alex or I. We can certainly help. Or if you want to just email us your comments directly, we can upload them too. So
okay.
We encourage you to get us those in advance. They're very helpful for both staff and the applicants.
Good,
broadly,
thank you.
Just this
Yep,
one.
yep. So without cutting anybody off, does anybody need to speak before I go on to the next item? And seeing no movement, thank you all then for this one. And we move on then to working group reports. You have them printed there. Any questions on any of those? To emergency approvals, Ryan?
None to report this month, Mr. Chair.
To motions, we have none. To notices of motion? Okay, to other business. Well, the other business, I will say at this point, Ted and Janine, I'm not going to ask you to go through your biographies, but next month, I would like to start by getting you both to introduce yourselves so we know a little bit of background. It makes it that much more personal. So you have correspondence here, and you have one piece of correspondence from Hank Weavers on the change of name of the Pump House Museum. Does anybody want to comment or suggest how we go ahead with this? Madam Clerk, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just put a note that correspondence is placed on the agenda for information for the committee. It is not to be deliberated on or really commented to other than within the context of a business item. So at this time, this is available for the committee to be aware of, and otherwise, it's not really open for discussion at this time.
Okay, and you've got correspondence. Oh, the next one is the video session on the changes to the Ontario Heritage Act. For those of you, I know a number of you are watching on June 10th. There's a second session on June 17. This is not the most exciting of presentations, but it may be of interest. And then on the 22nd, an introduction to the Act, and I don't know what that will be like, because I obviously haven't seen that one yet, but you've got the how to register, and they come from the ministry, so draw your attention to those. And then we have correspondence that's simply referring to the item we've already dealt with. So we now go on to Wednesday, the 21st of July at 9:30, and look for a mover to adjourn. Anybody want to adjourn? Jane and Donald Mitchell second. Those in favor, those opposed, carried unanimously. Very, very good. Thank you for that difficult and lots of thoughts. And yeah, enjoy the nice summer day out there. So I can say lots of things now. So, okay, we will see you hopefully at our site meeting. Take care.